conversation.
Find out who they
It
is.
was fun.
Yeah. Exactly.
Those flat earthers.
Well, we all know they're lizard people, so.
Lizard.
You're listening to the White Blood Cells Podcast.
I like to know sort of what all sides are saying, and then take one way or the other. So I follow a lot of people on both sides of the spectrum, and that's where I get a lot of my information from is X, just because you're going to get stuff that mainstream news will tell me later on, 5 hours later or the next day, and I already know. I always know way ahead of time. But that sort of thing has been real prevalent on there, and I think a lot of those fights have taken place on X or on Twitter or through that medium or other online mediums. So it's just something I paid a lot of attention to. I think is ridiculous and probably have thoughts on. I don't know if any of them will be valuable, but
Yeah, they will. They're all valuable. Well, have you been the target of like a cancel culture?
No, not at all. But it definitely just seems to be this sort of cultural phenomenon. I mean, it was on the heels of the Me Too movement, and it sort of became its own, took on a life of its own, and it just became this hammer that could get dropped on you, for any, if the mob decided to target you for any reason. Right. Usually for taking a stand against something. It's a lot of times when somebody gets targeted, but not always. And it's just such a ridiculous aspect of our culture, I think.
Well, and too, I think it's a way of control too, right? Because then you're afraid to stand up or stand out or stand up for what you believe in, because you're like, well, I don't want to get canceled. I don't want to say the wrong thing. So
I've had thoughts like the whole Karen thing. The whole "don't be a Karen" was a product of cancel culture. Like, don't stand up for your rights. Don't stand up for yourself. Don't make waves. Right? That's what the whole Karen thing.
So then, are you pro Karen?
That sounded very pro Karen to me.
because Karen is the one who's kind of like,
I've got a Karen in your life.
Yeah.
yes, and she's changed her name because of.
You're kidding.
Well, it's not official.
Okay.
But she goes by, her actual name is Karen, and she goes by Diana, and she changed her last name too, but that's a whole different story. But back to your question, man. I'm up for people who stand up for what they believe in. I'm up for integrity. I'm up for authenticity. So to be a Karen, to be a pain in the ass, no, I'm not for that.
Yeah.
To be a Karen, to be authentic, to have integrity, to be internally motivated for something instead of externally, I got to follow the rules. Yeah, I'm all for that.
Yeah. So I agree. And I think it's like, how do you be, how can you stand up for what you believe in and stand up for what's right and not be a Karen, or is it a Chad?
Chad's
that dude. Yeah. It's like,
I didn't even know there was a dude version.
Chad. Don't be a Chad.
No. The thing that I've kind of brought up and thought about lately with this whole election business, and I hate to even go there, but it's very representative.
It's relevant because right now, I mean, even if you say you supported Trump or you voted for him, it's like, you can get canceled.
Well, that was
individually canceled, essentially. Yeah.
That's how I have been the target of cancellation, not by mobs, but by my family, right? And we've talked about that a ton. Like, my kids do not talk to me. My parents, my mother did not talk to me for 4 years. So
over what?
That's what's weird is like
your brother too, right?
My brothers, both of my younger brothers, will not talk to me. So the target of cancellation is pretty familiar to me. Over what? I can't really put a finger on it. If I had to, I would say it's that back in 2016, I was a proponent. I didn't know where this was coming from at all. I just thought, I like Trump. I voted. I didn't have any problem vocalizing the fact that I thought he was kind of an interesting character who would pull back the curtain on this weird political environment we had in D.C., and I just thought that, and I didn't think it was any problem to discuss that, and I openly did with my family and some of my clients. The weird thing about it was I was having good debates with some clients about these things back before 2020. I had a couple of what I would consider to be pretty left-wing kind of clients. And this one gal was a huge proponent of Noam Chomsky. I don't know if you guys know Noam Chomsky. Yep. She loves him, and her and I were on the same page about that. And we were really, getting into some really cool conversations, and she was really appreciative of having those. She wrote me a Google review about what a great conversationalist, blah, blah, blah. And then 2020 happened. Right. And so in the first 6 months of that year is when all these people that I just mentioned to you, all of them, carte blanche there was no episode that I conducted with all these people. They all stopped talking to me at that moment in time. I've done some deep study analysis on this in my own mind about what was the point. The only thing that I can conclude was the COVID thing is what brought that to light.
Well, if you're pro-Trump and then you're also questioning the vaccine or lockdowns, then it's like next level.
Well, and I was making fun of people about wearing masks. I was making
that's it. Yeah.
So that's
like going to India and slapping cows around. I mean, it's really it was just one of those sacred things for them. Right. But I really, it's all about sort of stepping outside of the zeitgeist or the narrative or, whatever words you want to describe it. So whether it be, COVID or what have people gotten canceled over? I mean, any sort of sexual abuse allegation even can take you down. We saw that happen.
Until proven innocent.
Yeah. But it's sort of, just anything outside of what we allow for you to think and believe, it seems to be what gets attacked. And masks and of course all the things that were when shutdowns and masks and vaccines and all the things that could be questioned or were not black and white, but were presented as such.
Right.
Where it was presented vaccine good, if you don't take it bad.
Right.
And that is and we're seeing as more information has come out over the past few years that is not the case. That in many cases it had a detrimental effect. But the point being that, I was just chatting with James about how seed oils and butter, when I was a kid, butter was bad, and take margarine because margarine's better for you. And that has now been shown to not be the case.
Right.
But, it's always the experts that are telling you. And if you question that, even for valid reasons, even if there's historically, the experts have been wrong historically on a particular topic, you're still not allowed to question that. And it's just this sort of rule by authority, or the logic is always arguing, from authority. It's just, well, this authority figure said so you're wrong for
trust the science.
Yeah, you're too dumb. You're too dumb to read anything or to know anything about this. Trust the experts. Trust the science.
Right. But doesn't it? And this correlates, I think. But doesn't it seem like that's all for the purpose? I mean, if you zoom out a level or two. Doesn't it seem like that's all for the purpose to have us at odds with each other?
Yeah,
I mean, just to follow the narrative? Because aren't we easier to control whoever they is? And that's arguable, right? But everybody knows there's a they. We just don't agree on who it is. But if I'm trying to control people and I'm, a minuscule part of the population, I know really quick that if it's me versus them's going to win. If I'm one of the controllers, right? If my group is way smaller, so if I can get the infighting and if I can get everything black and white, it's a lot easier to pigeonhole people and get them to fight amongst themselves and take themselves out.
Well, and that's pretty much straight out of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. I mean, any population that you want to sort of impose your ideas upon.
Is that the Russian marketer guy?
Saul Alinsky?
Yeah.
No, I don't think he was Russian. He was an American academic.
Or a Nazi marketer. There's like a Nazi marketer who came up with the whole like marketing thing.
Oh.
Like, he was like, this is how you control people and manipulate them. It's like these 4 points of like marketing.
That's Freud's nephew.
Oh, yeah.
Bertrand Russell. No, not Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell's actually a really sharp guy. No, this guy's a sharp guy too. I can't think of his name. Bernays. Edward Bernays.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, Saul Alinsky is the guy that Hillary Clinton run. They were accusing her of being a Saul Alinsky using his methodologies. Mm-hmm. He described how the have-nots are to coalesce to kind of fight off the haves, right? Like
it's Marxism. Yeah,
I mean, he comes up with some good methods. I don't think it's necessarily Marxism. I kind of like the book, and I like some of his ideology. Mm-hmm. It's really not necessarily about Marxism as an economics thing. It's this kind of, how do you get the have-nots to gather together to make their point heard? The only way you can do it is you need to amass these groups, and here's how you do that. And so, to some extent, I think there's some valid points that he's making. I don't necessarily know. Like, it's not as sinister as Karl Marx writing, which is a whole different. And the MO behind Karl Marx is completely different. I don't.
Yeah. No, I mean, Alinsky's book is more about how to affect change. You know, what are some practical things we can do to. And they wanted to move things in a leftist direction. That doesn't make it Marxist, but yeah, the whole point was, here's rules to affect change, and how do you do that? And
his book was titled "Rules for Radicals," right?
Yep.
And I think Trump actually used some of that methodology to rally this blue collar class of people to get behind him.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't think that's necessarily. I'm not a proponent or hater of Saul Alinsky. I guess is the only point I'm trying to make. The other thing that I was kind of thinking about as we were talking, the Trump, the signs, the cancel culture thing, in my neighborhood, there popped up a lot of Harris signs before the election. And my question that I never got an opportunity to ask this question of any of the neighbors, because they never popped their heads out, and it was coincidental that I didn't get to ask them. But I wanted to ask them, with a Harris sign in front of their yard, aren't you afraid of getting a rock thrown through your window? Because
they would have said no. They would say no. Why would I?
Right. There's no way that they were afraid, and that's why they posted them. Now, on the other hand, there was only one Trump sign in my whole freaking neighborhood, right? And I know in part because people with the Trump sign might get a rock through their window. Yeah. And the irony of that's cancel culture at work, right? Mm-hmm. That's the pressure of knowing. And that's the weird thing, too, that I've recognized recently about they a lot of times accuse in the mainstream media, accuse the conservative class of people of being stuck in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Which, think about the irony of that is like, I've never met a conservative person who won't debate you face to face, who won't want to have the conversation.
Yep.
On the other hand, these other people will cancel you and will refuse. I mean, hardcore refuse to speak to you.
And you think that's what happened with your family?
They refuse because I email them constantly. I put phone calls out to them. Like, they refuse. And I've called my clients, too, with whom I've had really very limited personal relationship. They refuse to respond to emails, phone calls, phone messages. I went and shot guns with this one dude. He's kind of this younger dude. I went and shot guns, which you'd think, well, this guy's... He stopped talking to me during that same period, which I think he kind of got in the tank over some stuff too. So I'm just saying, like, it's just ironic that these people will not engage in conversation, and yet they'll accuse us of being stuck in an echo chamber.
But none of them said anything to you about, I'm cutting this conversation or this relationship off because it was just...
Not one of them gave me a because or a why, and I've asked my brothers, of course, like, what, can you give me some feedback?
Yeah, they don't. I agree that there's not a desire for a debate there. If I don't know, if your ideas can't hold up to that, then what good are they?
Well, I think that's the thing. They can't debate. They won't debate because they can't debate. Well,
there is no defense,
right?
For
if
the
you
position.
try to question them, well, it's like, well, I saw it on MSNBC or CNN. It's like, okay, but can you show me? And that's because I have some friends that are liberal, and it's just like. It's like, oh, I'm the conspiracy theorist because, the government, they're not out, they're here to help you. They really want what's best for you. You should just trust them.
Right,
You're being a whack job. I'm like,
MK Ultra. Who wouldn't trust their government?
Tuskegee
Nuclear
experiments.
weapons. Who wouldn't trust their government? Right.
Yeah.
No, the science is real thing. Like, read the definition of the scientific method.
Oh,
right?
Oh, man.
and these assholes have the science is real sign in their yard.
Yeah, we believe science is real, but they couldn't tell you anything about the scientific method or the steps involved, and how if you ask any of those questions, some of these narratives completely fall apart. Yes. That's science. Science doesn't have a trademark after it. Science is a process.
Right.
It's a set of steps you go through to get to what ultimately you hope is the right answer. But even when you
it's a moving target too.
There's very little certainty.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Science,
and it always needs to be revisited and
the idea of settled science. Yeah. What a joke!
Right.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's gravity. Like, if somebody's got something new to add to that, let's hear it.
Gravity is not real. It's actually the law of density, but we don't need to go there.
That's a different rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a different podcast.
Density here, or
but I think you get the point, though. I mean, really, nothing should be unquestionable. That's the whole idea of science.
Well, that is the whole idea.
And how many ideas do we have now? The heliocentric, model of the universe. How many people got burned at the stake for saying the sun's at the center?
Right.
Don't get flat Earth stuff started right now.
Okay, that's what I said. Different broadcast.
Yeah,
we're talking about conventional
we can talk
wisdom
about
here.
the realm another time.
Right.
But the point stands.
Right.
Just that. Yeah. That's that zeitgeist.
Yeah.
The acceptable narrative that here's what you're allowed to believe and nothing else. And I don't know how it got to be the whole cancel culture thing where you're essentially getting sort of silently canceled. And that's the reason why in your neighborhood probably there weren't a whole lot of Trump signs. Guaranteed there's more Trump supporter than one.
There's more than one.
But they're afraid
Right.
to.
They're afraid to.
And, so that's not an overt symptom of cancel culture, but it certainly has an impact on a lot of people. It's the silencing.
And that's kind of the idea of white blood cells, right? It's like coming together. Like the more white blood cells you have to attack a cancer or a bad thing, right? The more you're going to be able to heal yourself.
Yeah, you can't cower to this sort of thinking. Like you're the job of a white blood cell is to fight off that disease. You can't cower just because you got canceled or because it's a little uncomfortable to put the Trump sign is obviously metaphoric. I prefer, like your buddy, to wear a hat so it's on my body. So if somebody's going to throw a rock at me, at least I will see it coming, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
Versus putting a flag in my yard and then I leave and then, when I'm gone, so I think
how did the party of love and acceptance, how did they become so violent?
It's irony. Isn't this is the most ironic business, right? I mean, that's the thing, the party of joy, right? But we'll
peace.
It's the total opposite of that. There's not one. Every person that went to those Trump rallies said that is the most pleasant group of people. They're all the most friendly people. Have you heard that from people?
There's very fine people on both sides.
Okay, my bad. As they show people throwing rocks through Target store glass windows, and I don't know. It's ironic for sure.
Yeah,
I think that's part of the.
So then, what do you think? I mean, how do you heal the relationships with your family?
Well, that's it has.
And then, are you going to not work with clients that?
Well, in the beginning, I have to tell you, I was mad. I mean, first reaction is to just be appalled and mad and
you're pissed.
You're pissed, right? Then you go through this whole transformation because it's been 4 years, and finally, you finally soften up to this point where you're like, well, these people, I think that there's an element of empathy for whatever they've gone through. I mean, you've got to recognize that these people have been convinced by somebody. I mean, they have to take some ownership of it for themselves, but it's hard. Like, you got to overcome that first. They have to somehow overcome. In the meantime, you have to kind of feel empathy for whatever they've gone through that would cause them. And this is what I've said, like, there's mass murderers whose moms, Ted Bundy's mom, showed up,
right.
To see him. Like, he murdered tons of people. All I've done here was like say something about Trump. So to have my mom wouldn't talk to me for 4 years. She went through something really traumatic for that to happen, I guess is my point. And I started really thinking about that and thinking, I've got to show empathy for whatever she's gone through, whatever kind of mental affliction, because I think at this point it's like a disease that they've been afflicted with. And do you guys have any thoughts about that?
I think the media plays a huge role in it. And if we just looked for answers by looking at the media, remember Walter Cronkite, and that's the way it is, right? I mean, it used to be that news tried to be fair and balanced, like for real, not a Fox News
impartial,
and all that. It used to really try to be the news, which included,
well, there's only 3 channels, so if you tick off, half the country, they're not going to watch you. They're going to go to one of the other channels.
Right. So. But if you look at the media as like if you just saw a news clip from 2000, 2010, 2020, and maybe even more granular than that, I think what happened, might not be a traumatic event to somebody who's got complete cognitive dissonance. And I think cognitive dissonance is real. Mm-hmm. And I think it was planned by they, and we can talk about who they is. They're living on flat earth somewhere, but but I think it was planned. And I think the subconscious mind controls 95 to 98% of our behaviors and our thoughts, So they're masters at programming the subconscious mind. And I think
with blue light,
well, and mostly with repetition. Mm-hmm. And if you look at broadcasts, it's constantly like the Trumpers are the bane of existence. I mean, they're actually evil. They don't just have a different opinion. And if you looked at a broadcast from 2010, I think it would be like we're right and they're wrong, perhaps.
Right.
But it wouldn't be that they're evil, that they're bad, and that the elimination of the Trumpers is the answer to all our problems.
No, they're using the word deplorables again, right? Yes. Right now, which I thought kind of got extincted after 2021 because I heard some people using deplorables, right? But it's been back in the mainstream media again.
Right.
Because you're right. It's repetition of that. These people are deserving of punishment, extinction. Yeah.
Well, and that mob mentality, right? Where if you can get enough people to go along, I think I listened to this the CIA study, right? And they had this triangle, and they brought all these CIA agents in and filled them in on to say that this was a square. And they went around the room, and then there was one person who wasn't in on it. And so they went around the room, and they said, "Oh, what is this?" They're like, "A triangle. It's a triangle." And then when they got to the last person, he knew it was.
He kind of looked around and went, "Triangle."
Yeah, exactly. He's like, "Oh, it's a square, but I'm going to say triangle because everyone else is saying that." Yep. And I think we kind of saw that too with, even like the riots and all sorts of. I had cousins and stuff that were like going down to the riots in New York, like during 2020, and when it was just kind of like, well, like everyone's doing it, so I should probably join in so I can be accepted,
Well, and that's just, I've done a lot of studies with my coaching endeavors on the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is loving you. Really, it's trying to protect you. It tries to protect you by fitting in. So that is very real, and
it's a self-preserving thing.
Yeah, it's trying to get you as part of the bigger crowd, because when there were saber-toothed tigers around and stuff, it's better if you're with 20 of your buddies instead of alone, right? So it's a residue from that, perhaps. But there is this fit in. That's why people like us are the weirdos, because we don't really give a shit about fitting in. We care about the internal guideposts, the integrity within, however that,
And most guys, like if you can separate them from the herd, can logically sit here and like we're all pretty cause and effect oriented, right?
Right.
That's how. I mean, you wouldn't be able to survive if you weren't cause and effect oriented. And in previous times, punishment for not adhering to cause and effect was pretty immediate. You just that's why I say the personal responsibility thing for me is paramount. Because like if you fuck up, well, punishment is right around the corner, and so I'm not going to fuck up next time because I just got punished for that. We've put some insulation between that, right? Nowadays,
there's like you were kind of saying, right? Like in that video where you have your car is insulating you from somebody else. You have a telephone that insulates you from somebody else. And you told the story about how your ex-father-in-law said, I'm going to kick your ass. And it's like, oh, how convenient. You're 900 miles away and you're telling me on the phone, you know?
Right. No, but it's not even that, but like all these other like insurance companies, for example, like health insurance is just a joke to me because like basically they're encouraging people to overeat. And now, to solve that, we've got what's Ozempic.
Yeah.
We've got like, you've got all these barriers to just what cause and effect life would probably have you stay on. Like nature has you stay on this path. But we got all this insulation in the way.
Well, big pharma, right? It just tries to remove the consequences of your bad decisions through a drug.
Right. And we're encouraging bad behavior. All of those are doing is encouraging bad behavior. I think. I don't know. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts about like the medical industry? I know you've got some pretty deep understanding of that, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, from my perspective, I'm a cancer reversal coach, and to do this in 30 seconds or less, the true root cause of cancer, and this is not, everything that I'm certified in to call myself a cancer reversal coach is empirically verified. It's not a theory. It's not somebody doing bong hits and then going, hey man, I got to figure it out. It's empirically verified. So the true root cause of cancer is stuck emotions, for whatever reasons. So to cure from the stuck so if you cure the stuck emotions, the energy block, right? The cancer, it's just like putting an elastic around your finger, right? If I put an elastic around my finger right there's nothing wrong with this part of my finger.
Just the blood flow's blocked.
Right. So if I eat organically and I got this around it's not going to do much. If I irradiate this part of my finger, it's not going to do much to heal it, right? As this part dies, when I have the elastic on, if I take the elastic off, it heals. So I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but it's basically internally fixed instead of externally.
So your emotions and your trauma are the rubber band around.
Exactly. And I don't know how that related to what you said.
Well, it does relate. I mean, I think that like again, we're going to that's a resounding theme, right? They are short circuit. They're putting all these rubber bands or elastic bands around our brains, around our like mouth, whatever they're putting them around to screw up our emotions so that we don't know how to like cognitively figure out, this is all a psyop on us to keep us in this dependent state so they can just keep selling us more Wegovy or Ozempic or whatever other drugs we're addicted to, painkiller drugs or Prozac or whatever.
Oxycontin.
I mean, did you... Who's the comedian that talks about getting you on the comeback? Chris Rock. I think you've listened to Chris Rock from like the 90s or something. He's like, I want to get him on the comeback. Well, like that's what this is all about, right? It's if we could just keep them on a subscription-oriented basis, well, then we've got a lifetime of profits. And if they never question us over that, well, then it's even better. So, that blue light thing was kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, that whole episode is really good. But he goes off and he's like a really smart dude. Like he's a brain surgeon.
Yeah.
That guy who he's talking to. And he goes all in on how the blue light.
Is this the LED thing that I've been seeing over the past couple of days?
Well, it's so essentially blue light, which is in LEDs and on your phones and all that stuff. It's actually a technology that was developed in the 50s by IBM in cooperation with the CIA in order to do mind control, essentially.
The CIA would never do that.
Never, ever. The TV itself was a military weapon.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
How
to program people.
Yeah, exactly. It's called programming for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, TV programming. Yeah, see, there's words. They mean something.
Well, they're spells, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Spelling.
Yeah, words are spelling. Spells.
I mean, there's meaning in all this stuff. And it's conspiracy theory if you want, but isn't it interesting that the CIA came up with the term conspiracy theorist at the JFK assassination?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Strictly for the purpose.
As a way to smear
and just marginalize anybody that doesn't do the cancel culture
and it's
thing.
still being used today. I mean, that effectiveness of that phrase has maybe diminished slightly over the past, like almost since COVID, just because I think a lot of people sort of woke up and saw that the conspiracy theory was actually just the truth,
Right.
not a theory of any kind, and it was an actual conspiracy. A conspiracy is just two or more people deciding to do something for their benefit. That's really all it is.
They conspire.
They are conspiring. So it's not that crazy of a thing to think that people are, especially in the medical industry, are conspiring to make money. I conspire to make money in my business.
Right.
It doesn't come at the cost of anyone, and that's not a liability or a risk for me. But that is their business, and it's their job to make money. So why wouldn't we expect them to do that? But yeah, I think when we're healthy, our health is the medical industry's loss of profit. I think anybody could agree with that statement. Left, right, it doesn't matter. If you're healthy, they're not making money. And so I think there's a very perverse incentive for us not to be healthy. And obviously, that's not every doctor you walk into. It's not a doctor's office that's wanting you to be sick.
But it makes me question, right? When their motive is the profit. I mean, even the
There
dentist,
is no incentive for us to be healthy.
It's like
from their end.
Yeah, I'm thinking like, all right, you could be really well-intentioned person. I think about my kids. I just got braces on my middle son, and I'm thinking it's like, man, it's $5,000, and he's in 8th grade, and his head doesn't even stop changing until he's 25, and this is his second round of braces. I'm like, could we just waited until he, was fully developed and then done braces on him? But it's like, well, there's no money in that. They got to say, well, his bite's a little off.
Get him
and
on
we
the
need
comeback. Go watch Chris Rock. That it's interesting because this made me think of something as you were talking, Adam, about I just watched the company that produces Ozempic. They were just on 60 Minutes or something like this last week.
They can't even sell it in their own country.
They can't. It's not that they can't sell it, but it's produced in Denmark, right?
Yeah.
And the lady who it was originally invented as a cure to diabetes like 50 years ago. They kind of like Viagra, they've came upon this.
Yeah, they figured out it does other things.
The funny thing about this company is Novo Nordisk. It's like the stock price has gone through the roof, as you might imagine. This company is ridiculously wealthy, and it's brought a ton of wealth into Denmark, which has almost no other industry. But the interesting thing that she pointed out, she was like, well, I don't care about the money. And you could tell by listening to her talk, she was genuinely just totally indifferent to the amount of money that this thing generated for her and the company. I mean, that was good for the company because they built a new office or whatever, but she was genuinely not that impressed or gloating about the money. And they interviewed several other Danish people, including the CEO of the company, about this whole thing. And they're like, yeah, the money's there. You could just tell in their spirit, in their whole philosophy about it. The money was not the thing. The interesting thing that they pointed out in this interview was that in Denmark, you can buy that drug, but they cannot advertise the way they advertise it in this country. And there's also the anti-liability, the liability issue.
Right. So you can't sue because wasn't there the scandal around Ozempic is that essentially you can never go off of it, essentially, where it's like once you start it, you can't go off because your guts and stuff get used to it, and then they essentially die without it, and then you have all sorts of other gut health issues.
I
and
think
things
there's
like that
major side effects that people have not thought through. I don't know about the not.
I had not heard that, but
that's what I heard. Now this is all just conspiracy theories. Exactly. Don't this is not medical advice.
We're not giving anybody medical advice or
or financial or anything.
We're not guaranteeing that you won't get cancer. Whatever.
This is really just a passion project of a bunch of dudes that talk about stuff.
No, but it's really interesting to note that that's another thing that I recognized in watching. Did you guys see that movie Bowling for Columbine?
Yeah, I never actually watched
by
it.
What's his face?
Yeah, Michael Moore.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I'm no fan of.
I never saw it,
but he is a really insightful guy who, the point of that movie, I think, was that gun control. He's like, there are just as many guns in Canada because the guy Michael Moore lived lives in Michigan or something,
Yeah.
so he's really close to Canada. And he knows that Canadians have tons of guns too, but they just don't kill each other. There are almost no school shootings in Canada.
Right.
In the United States, there's just school shootings all the time. And in part, I think, and it's been a long time since I watched the movie, but the gist of it was that this media system in this country just is constantly kicking sand in the face of everybody here. For God only knows what reason, because it's really pretty sinister if you think about it. Making money is one. I mean, I guess there's that
because
motive,
that's the
but-
eyeballs, right? Because that's my thing. Like even I was alive, or I was in high school when Columbine took place, right?
Yeah.
And it was a money making machine because it's like 24-hour news cycle. They get all these eyeballs turning on and watching the commercials and tuning in,
Yep.
and then they just want to pump that fear because that keeps people glued to the television, you know. And so, how do you fix that though? I mean, we know what the problem is. We know, like, okay, like this.
Well, why? How?
Is that
I don't
money?
think you. Well, without controlling, they're playing on a basic human, one of the most primal basic human emotions.
Yeah.
Fear. It's one of the best ways to control somebody, and they know this, right? I mean, they've had people studying this for 100 years. You know, how do we most effectively get into people's heads, get them to change their minds? And so, you're not going to stop that. You're not going to stop them selling the number one motivator to a humans. They're going to continue.
I think you can, because I think look at that Denmark example. There's a lot of other countries in Europe, like this whole thing. I don't know this thing with the internet. There's some rule where monopolization of like Facebook and Google over there is they can't get it through because these governments over there are genuinely interested in the welfare of their people. Scandinavian countries particularly, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at, like, this is a weird connection, but if you look at like how they measure happiness or whatever, the wealthiest in terms of happiness and welfare of human populations.
Finland.
It's always
right
in
up
these
there.
Scandinavian countries. And it's because they kind of have a uniform population of people, and they all kind of have this mentality of taking care of each other. Like, there's something to that. So I think it can be dealt with, but how they're doing it is the question.
Well, this goes back to the other thing, and nobody said the word, but tribalism and division, being divided.
Yep.
I think tribalism is one of our biggest issues right now. That we love to go into a camp, one or the other, and that's another one of those just sort of natural human, instinctual drivers.
Yeah.
Is to be part of something, to be accepted, to be. Those countries that have those really, really high, they tend to be fairly homogenous.
Yes.
In their, it's a group of people, whether they look the same or not, but they all have the same ideals. They have that Finnish ideal or the Swedish ideal, and I think America sort of used to be that way, and when you when you moved to this country, you became American, and you were proud to be an American. You weren't a Mexican anymore. When my family came over from Germany, I guess is where they came from. They weren't Germans anymore. We took a C out of our name to become more American.
Right.
But I think that I don't know when in the past 20-ish years, maybe there's been this shift to, well, you bring your culture with you and then celebrate and live your culture inside this country. And I think there's so many cultures that you're not going to get people to agree the way that it is now.
Right.
It was sometime after 9/11.
It's not one team.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when 9/11 happened, I felt like the country was greater than ever. Like in the sense of like, we're American, we're coming together, we're going to fight for this. I mean, I had friends who enlisted in the Marines and, it was like, we love our country. And then sometime, maybe Obama.
Well, no, I mean, I think being lied to about the reason we went over there, that's sort of, I mean, there was disillusionment there with a lot of people. Why are we in Iraq? Saddam Hussein had zero to do with this. So why are we there? And those questions didn't even start getting asked until 2 or 3 years after, we had been there.
But why don't people try to get into Scandinavian countries? And
It's cold, man.
And the other thing is
50-60% tax
countries
rates too.
This is my liberal friends say that like, oh well, look at Denmark or look at Sweden. They're better countries than America. And I'm like, well, are they? Like, I don't know.
They're the places where socialism can kind of work
on a small scale
with a
unified population. Yeah,
you have to have that, and that's why this is what's ironic too is nationhood is a term that they will smear. They will smear. Nationhood is not tolerated. You right?
Nationalism.
Nationalism.
Yeah.
I wrong.
Yep. No, you're not allowed to be proud.
You're not allowed to be proud of this country. That wasn't the case after 9/11.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
That's fine.
but
you can't be proud to be an American.
If you're an American,
right? That's looked down on.
Yeah.
And I've run this by my brother when he was emailing me, and I was talking about nationalism a little bit because I was like, I watched this video about this guy talking about island nations like Great Britain and Japan is a really very nationalistic country, right? They won't let
the most.
One of the most.
Japan.
You're totally right. They won't. If you're trying to sell vacuum cleaners over there, they're like, wait, is it for good or bad? And they're not going to let you in unless it's for the good of their people.
Yeah.
And that's absolute. And it's this guy that did the video. It was kind of metaphoric because he's saying like with an island nation, you've literally got a border that cannot be easily permeated.
Right. And resources that are limited.
Yes.
You've only got so much space. And if England doesn't have oil, so yeah, I mean,
you got to become self-sufficient, right?
Yeah, or just colonize and conquer somebody else so you can get their oil.
You're wealthy enough. That's what the wealthy countries have done. But you get into that lazy state, sort of, or that state where it's okay to, what you were talking about, consequences, and we've been insulated from consequences, and I think that's part of it. Just the amount of wealth, even the poorest people living here. I'm not the guy that lives on a tent in the street, but
he didn't even live in the tent. He lives on the tent.
If you have housing, you're wealthy. You're probably within the top 2, to 5% of the wealth of the world if you live in a home, which is just crazy. And the perspective is gone. Stuff is too easy to get for free. The's not a reason to work if you don't
so much
want
abundance
to. There's
too.
so
It's
much
like,
abundance. That abundance has bred apathy and allowed for a lot of these things.
That circular hard times create strong men create bad.
Easy times.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's for sure the phase that we're in. But go ahead.
So I don't know if this is going to take us in the direction we want to go.
Flat Earth.
He's been chomping at the
They won't let us at the North Pole. All the governments have come together.
You know, the North Pole is not that interesting, but Antarctica, that's really interesting with the flat Earth theory. What was I going to say? Not Bowling for Columbine, but I think and I'm not a huge Michael Moore fan either, but he's interesting and he questions stuff.
Yeah.
So it was some movie where he was going to various countries across the globe, and he's meeting, because he's Michael Moore, he's getting to meet with Parliament, he's getting to meet with the influential people. I remember him going to Iceland because I'm Icelandic, and they're all women, all the higher ups are women there and stuff. But getting back to the whole Scandinavian country and stuff, there was a guy that they had some kind of Alcatraz, and I don't remember if it's off Finland or Denmark. It's somewhere in Scandinavia,
Mm-hmm.
But he had chopped up his family. He had chopped up his entire family, and that's why he was in the Scandinavian Alcatraz, right? So Michael Moore's interviewing him. They come in and everything. Well, guess what this guy's position is in this Alcatraz? He's the chef. And he had a machete in his hand.
What?
And Michael Moore said, what? I mean, so let me get this right. This guy chopped up his family. That's why he's here. And all the authorities said, well, yeah, he was lonely. He felt alienated. He felt like he didn't matter at all.
And he's damn good at chopping.
And here he's home. And so we've given him what he needs. Now, I'm not a big component of the far left, like rehabilitate everybody. Sometimes I
give
think,
them needles. Just, they have needle stations. They can, drug up in the streets. It's a safe place.
Right. And that's exactly what I'm not saying. But there's something about that that I found really compelling about how they're not just going to marginalize this guy, you know, and he was one of the most popular figures there, and he's like one of the most gentle.
Maybe what it is that maybe America's too big. Maybe we need to split into like 5 countries, you know, and
or 50 countries, to go back to my citizenship.
Yeah, I mean, right, and then each state takes care of its people.
Yes,
and then we all work together with other countries, states, to, you know, provide for each other and whatever. I mean, because I think there's an element, right? They say, oh well, socialism works for Scandinavia. Like they should just, I mean, that was Bernie's whole thing, right? Like he's always pointing, you know, Bernie Sanders was always pointing to these like socialist countries, like, look how they do it there, you know, like whatever.
Good accent. I like it.
And yeah, and so, but I think like, oh, well, how do you implement that with 300 million people, you know?
You don't. And Adam made the point earlier too. It's gotta be small scale. That's why this country's design was designed the way it was. You cannot centralize things. You can't monopolize these systems.
It's got to be a republic.
It's got to be a republic for sure, but it's got to be locally oriented. It does. I mean, that the uniformity of the population, the commonality in ideology is all important. The other example, this is like 20 years ago. I'm sitting there at some restaurant down Highlands or something and having a drink, and this French dude, I'm talking to him at the bar, and he's we're talking. Oui. No, he's having a glass of wine, and it's summertime, and we're talking about the drought. I said something about the drought. We're having a drought, and he's like, I said, we have watering restrictions, and he's like, well, what is that? I'm like, well, we can't water the grass or whatever. And he's like, what? I've never heard of that. He was a doctor. He was here for some doctor conference. So he's not just some bozo, but like he's talking to me about, he said, we don't have that in France at all. We have droughts, but we just know, like, if we're in the city, we know that the farmers need that water, so we just won't water. We don't have to have restrictions for it. Like, it was just weird because it was just like, it just was intuitively known, we're going to take care of each other. And that struck me. That was 20 years ago. I just never not forget that conversation, because that guy said it like so flippantly, like I've never heard of government implemented restrictions on such a thing. That was before they imported lots because I think France is the epicenter of what's happened here, where they imported in tons of other non-French people into that country. So now I'm certain
England's having that issue too, you know, with
Germany. Germany's had that problem.
So then what? You just got to become sort of xenophobic, racist, and, you know, white supremacist in order to have
you're using a lot of their terminology right now. No, I mean, that's the problem, is they've smeared these are xenophobia is a connotation that is horribly negative. Xenophobia, by definition, the definition probably doesn't have a negative connotation to it, nor does nationalism. But nationalism now, if you say that,
Hitler.
My brother accused me of being Hitler, and that's all he said. He said, "What are you, Hitler?"
Crazy.
He put the smear on me, and now the smear is attached, right? It's hard to get if you get smeared with tar, it's hard to get it off, right? And that's what they've done. They've mastered the technique of smearing you, and they've dumbed all of the rest of these people down to the point where they're not going to question, why does that guy have the smear on him? They're just going to assume, well, he's a loser if he's got it.
But is that changing a little bit? I mean, with Trump the first time, and especially this time, I mean, it was Hitler.
Yeah.
It was just nonstop this time, and it was pretty bad the first time too. They hit him with everything, but it just isn't sticking anymore. And I think it's almost been so overused, these over the top terms, that they've lost their meaning and they're sort of losing their power.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think the pendulum is swinging to a degree. To where that sort of immediate cancel culture, that it's just almost not going to fly quite as quick as it did before. I just have that feeling a little bit. Like all this stuff, I mean, any election before this one, 2024, and they could essentially take down they again. Well, when I say they, I'm talking about the media, and in this context, the essential
they own them.
Yeah, there's obviously, I mean, I can't imagine that they all feel and think and want to push the exact same narrative without some sort of guidance from above. how that would be possible year after year and week after week. They're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't see how that's possible without some sort of guidance, but it just wasn't effective. It didn't work. The smears didn't take him down.
Well, he was above the smears.
Yeah, he somehow, what Teflon Don, right?
Yeah.
That was the thing. Nothing could stick to him. And I don't know. Hopefully that things swing in that direction a little bit towards a little more reason. But even for your brother to call you Hitler, I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's so over the top.
That's
so hyperbolic that
That's
that blows
why I
me
think
away.
it's a menticide, I think is a term that's been thrown around. I think there is a
Menticide.
genuine mental affliction that these people have been afflicted with. They've assumed now it's going to take, there's a corrective force that's at play, Adam. I think you're totally right about that. I think that it takes a lot of insistence and strength and not bowing down to it, because what I keep saying is there's not just one white blood cell. Donald Trump by himself is not going to solve this problem. The good thing you can already tell is he's enlisting a whole cabinet of people who feel the same way. Now, they by themselves aren't going to solve the problem either. You have to have a hugely healthy population of people that are protectors of that. That's how Denmark works. That's how the Scandinavian countries work, because they
buy in.
They all buy in, and they all believe, they all understand their purpose, and their purpose is to hold the freaking fort down. Yeah. You can't let these people punch through. You can't bow down to somebody calling you Hitler or whatever. That's, might be offensive to begin with, but you stand up to that. You take a stand on it. You empathize with them for a minute. You make some arguments about why, and you try. You may not change their mind at that moment in time, but you keep the pressure on. You keep your protective guard up. You keep your armor on, right?
Mm-hmm. The full armor of the Lord.
Go ahead and
bust
it. I know you got it. You had it yesterday. This guy was preaching yesterday, you guys. I wish I had recorded it. He's always like, let's just put the tape on. We were on a phone call, so we didn't have a recording mechanism, but that was good, man.
Yeah.
No, but that's...
Yeah, I want to say that there's got to be a way for us to get back to that. And I think what it is trying to live above reproach, right? I think there's a lot of people, especially in the government, who come from shady past, and then you see all this stuff with P. Diddy and Epstein and all this kind of stuff. So you have a lot of these wicked people who are in these positions of power, and then they're always living in fear of getting shut down or found out or whatever. And so then they're always doing the bidding. And so I'm hoping that maybe with the pendulum swinging this other way, that there's some more people who are living above reproach, and they're living good lives, and there's not going to be much on them to try to tear them down or manipulate them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think from a frequency standpoint, Teflon Don or whatever was that, because he did exactly what you're talking about. He was above it. I mean, from an energetic standpoint, if somebody's operating down here and they're calling you Hitler and stuff, if you go down there to meet them, then they've got you.
Right.
But if you stay up here from a frequency standpoint, which the unseen informs all the seen. It's not the other way around.
As above, so below.
There you go.
Yeah.
So on a flat earth, I don't know how relevant that is. Right? So anyway.
Within the firmament,
There you go. So I think that's how change comes about, really. I think when we're fighting, when we're fighting with a brother, I'm not saying you are, but when you're fighting with a brother that's calling you Hitler, when you're pushing back against cancel culture or whatever, you have to get down to their level to do that. And I think if enough of us are the fact that we're having this conversation, to me, means we're above the bullshit that we're talking about, really.
Yeah.
On a personal and collective level, with at least the four of us here.
Yeah.
Right. So I think when enough of us do that, and the way it happens is what Adam said. I mean, its time has run out. I mean, you can't just say conspiracy theorist anymore, and people go, "Oh, just cancel that guy away," or you can't just say Hitler and just smear. I think people are getting bored with it, and that's the natural cycle of things. And I think that just from an individual perspective, coming from where you want to come from, no matter what you want to call that love, call that a higher vibration, call it just being above, being called Hitler or whatever. It doesn't matter what you call it. But I think when enough of us do that, we'll get to a Malcolm Gladwell track.
The tipping point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's how we do it. And I think it's taking individual responsibility. And you were talking earlier, you two, about the Finnish thing and about the socialism and how it can work. And the French guy that said, what do you mean water restrictions? We just know what's going on and we act appropriately. That's the kind of, I mean, what's the basis of that? I'm always looking for the root cause of everything. Because if you understand the cause, the effect doesn't matter because you're at the cause, right? Mm-hmm. But the cause, in my opinion, of that French guy saying that is taking personal responsibility for the situation that he finds himself in France. Right. Like when they have a drought, they all go, okay, we've got this condition. We're all in this together, not from a libtard situation. Yeah. I didn't just say that, but yeah, I mean, it comes from personal responsibility, which is what I'm talking about, like raising the frequency.
Well, and I guess at the root of it, it's good versus evil, right? And there's this battle that's taking place, and we're at war. There's a spiritual war happening all around us. And there's always going to be this battle of good versus evil. And I think about, evil wants to demonize the farmer because it's a right-wing, Trump-supporting white supremacist racist out there in the country. And then why would you, as a good neighbor, want to not use your water to support Hitler?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so this is
a
that
low trust society.
Right, exactly.
Is really what it is, yeah.
And that's where they want to keep us at odds,
yeah.
And that battle going on. So it's like, okay, how do we need to come together, and then, because I think for me, I've always tried to love people no matter what. Like I always want to hear, I'm a very curious person. I want to hear people's stories, and I don't want to make judgments on them. And I think a lot of people would be shocked about how conservative I am as a person, because, in their minds, they have this conceived idea about me of like, oh, he's so friendly. He's got white glasses. He's eccentric, blah, 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 whatever. He's probably like, Kamala, like, bandwagon. But then it's like, I break that in their brains of like, oh, wait, like, how are you so kind and friendly and then all this conservative,
Both things can't be true, right?
Right.
That's in their mind. It's really black and white things. Like, that's another thing, is there's so much nuance in all of these things. Like you can, like this conversation we started a little bit earlier about the greater good versus, I call it the invisible hand. I don't know if anybody here is
Adam
familiar.
Smith.
Adam Smith. So invisible hand is just like the free market system, and how the free market, it's God or the universe or whatever you want to call it. It's like we're all magically inclined to be really good at these certain things that we do. And if we work together, it's like that video that you sent me from Milton Friedman.
Yeah.
He's like the pencil.
Yeah.
You know how many things it took? Somebody had to cut down a tree with a saw.
The saw had to be made.
The saw had to be made. The saw was made out of iron and steel. And there was so he goes through all this series of things that caused, it took to make that pencil. And there's thousands of people in that process. And that in essence is the invisible hand, right? It's this magical thing that we can't ever put a finger on the one thing, but profit motive drives us to those things. Greater good is somewhere in there too. Like we're all like this, I hate using this word liberal because it's such a misnomer. So I don't know, I'll call them left leaning people.
Libtards.
Libtard. Thank you. Let's go with that. Everybody can understand what we're talking about then. They love this idea of the greater good, but it's only by force, right? They want to mandate that you get solar panels on your house. They want to mandate that you
get vaccinated.
They want to mandate all these. Yeah, the vaccination thing is the perfect example. They want to mandate because you're going to kill everybody else if you don't do this. The greater good in those Scandinavian cultures is by choice. It's not forced upon them. And that choice is because they've got a philosophical understanding, this nuanced idea of understanding. If we're all doing good, it's going to help me too. So there's this
goes back to Adam's point of trust.
It's totally
versus
trust.
Not trust.
Yes.
That's a high trust society. You can trust that the other person also has your best interests at heart. Whereas that's, I think, really what it boils down to. And you can't in this country just because, we're saying, and that goes back to the tribalism and the division. And you're on one side or the other. And so I can't trust those guys. So now you've got two camps and the country split in half. And why would one help the other? I mean, you saw that during North Carolina and all the liberals. Or they a senator from North Carolina didn't vote for the FEMA funding a month prior. So cut him off. And that sort of tit for tat, like my team against your team, and always trying to get even the score. It's not going to work that way if that's the way it's happening. And that's the division as long as we're divided.
But isn't also what makes America great is that competitive, like spirit in that. I mean, that's why we have grown to the most powerful, most greatest country on the earth because of this like competitive, I want to win and dominate.
But what that competition used to mean is it used to mean like two guys getting in a scruff at a bar, like, before they would knife each other or shoot each other.
Yeah.
But beat the crap out of each other and then go right back in there and buy each other a beer. That's what the competition used to be. What the competition means now is I literally want to kill you.
I want to kill you. Yeah. And
you're
expendable.
Yeah. You're not even human.
Right.
It's a totally different thing versus I want to make a better battery than you, and so we're going to both fight to make a good battery or a car or whatever it is. I mean, they have programmed people with hate. I mean, that's all this talk on the left about, all the hate on the right. But man, the most hateful people I have met anywhere just would hate with the core of their one of my good friends. Hated Donald Trump. Hated. I remember him telling me how much he hated him.
Like
Visceral, yeah. Like, when he said the word hate, he's like, oh, I hate him. He's just terrible. He's this and that. And then over the past couple years, sort of because of some of this hypocrisy and this, this over-the-top hyperbolic rhetoric that is, sort of clearly not true. And a lot of the sort of, the way that transgenderism is being pushed so hard, onto kids and, for everybody to accept and not just accept, but approve. And after all those things, he voted for Trump this year. And I was blown away. I thought there's no way that just happened. And he did. So I think that pendulum is swinging a little bit. Exactly why I started
saying that. The pendulum is, no, you're totally right about that. And I totally agree with you about that. It is swinging because it's like, my buddy says this too, like you can step off the side of a building and maybe you won't fall down for a while. Like whatever we've done, like what I was talking about earlier, like whatever this culture has done to cause this guy to levitate there, all these weird ideas. But truth is gravity. And you can fight that off for a while with this levitating system, whatever you're doing to hold this thing up after you stepped off the side of the building. But eventually you're falling and that levitation system will stop. And this truth is gravity and you cannot stop it. And so it may take a while for some, because I've talked to a lot of friends who are like the one you described, and they did the turnaround this time too. So I think that truth is pervading. The other people are still in their, they're people that are really susceptible to groupthink, right? Yeah. I mean, that groupthink thing, there's protection in the herd. And like you were saying earlier, we are the ones willing to step outside and test. And there's always like this handful of people that are willing to step outside and test it. But we want the other people. The truth will cause these other people to kind of follow along, I believe. But my point is like we got to kind of maintain this strength, this philosophical strength, right? It's like you have to have conversations that go beyond the Broncos. Yeah. You have to have you have to exercise this muscle. And that's part of what
I wish they would teach virtues in school. Like I think there's a lot of knowledge to be held in even just some of like Marcus Aurelius. I don't know if you've ever read any of that stuff.
Really stoic.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, man, if they just taught some of this stuff in schools to kids, like how beneficial that'd be to society.
Man, the school system was set up by the Rockefeller Foundation to make good little slaves.
That's
for
yeah.
It's the
widgets.
Opposite.
Yeah,
they're not taught how to think; they're taught what to think.
Exactly right.
Yep. Yeah. But I think that's by design.
No,
Yeah, and because an educated populace is not as easy to control. Or
right.
one that knows how to think, one that can
Free
think critically.
thinking.
Yeah,
Right.
one that can ask questions instead of just receiving answers and taking them at face value.
Right. Which, I mean, again, right, it just goes back to like there are a lot of people who sometimes, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, where it's like you meet somebody and it's just like they don't know anything besides like, what do you mean? Like the weather's 65 degrees and the Broncos lost.
Yeah.
Like it like short circuits their brain to like try to talk about anything with depth or, outside of whatever narrative's coming through their glowing box,
I've been encouraged more, like you keep saying, Adam. I keep talking to people that are more inclined lately, like in the last 6 to 12 months, where they will engage these conversations where 2 or 3 years ago, it was like you just described. They are just going to avoid them like the plague. And I think it's a product of the fact that it's been like stuffed down in this corner for so long. These people are coming up out of the woodwork now. I think Joe Rogan is a perfect example. I mean, that guy's got the most viewership or listenership in the world because, and the interesting thing about that is because you can watch him by yourself, right? Like he's not having a public sphere of like people where you have to go out and be seen. So that's part of that cancel culture. He's a solution to the cancel culture because you don't have to let anybody know that you've been watching Joe Rogan. You can do it in private.
Right.
And I mean that's
no, you're right. It kind of slides underneath that hidden cancel culture.
Yeah.
Because there's no way you're going to be discovered.
But there's an obvious want to hear these ideas, right?
If there wasn't, he wouldn't be as popular as
exist.
he is.
Yeah. Something to note. Yeah.
No, I think so. I mean, how many listeners does he get on average per show? 60 million. Or he's got 480 million subscribers, but he actually gets, and CNN gets less than 1 million viewers a night in prime time.
Yeah.
They're down.
300,000.
I mean, it's just not even.
It's embarrassing.
It's
right?
embarrassing, but yet mainstream media is still held up as like the source of information, and it's not. It's not. It's a farce.
Like
it's
I've said this to you before. The harder I try, the less I succeed, and like I've learned that through a lot of trial and error throughout my life. Right? That like if I'm insistently trying to force some idea it doesn't work. You can't insist. But that's what the mainstream media is doing right now. They're just doubling down and they want to try to make their last push. It might be their last hurrah because I totally think that you're right about this, Adam. I think most sensible people have realized this is a bunch of bullshit and we got to move on.
Well, that's indicating. I mean, there's so many indications of that, right? But we were talking about Joe Rogan. Look at Russell Brand.
Oh yeah.
I mean, liberal, like just this playboy. Now he's leading prayer.
Yeah, he's like a hardcore Christian now. He went real spiritual, where he went like Buddhism and whatever, and then he's come full circle to be like, there's only one way to
that's amazing.
to God, Jesus.
But Chris Wallace just quit. He was with Fox for years. I think he was MSNBC. He was with a more left-leaning station recently, but he just quit.
Or Chris Cuomo.
No, he got fired. He didn't have a choice.
But he's
Chris Wallace,
more independent.
Yeah, he has. Because he sees that mainstream media is losing its power, it's losing its influence. Sort of what Tucker's doing, what Joe. That's where it's at. You can talk to people directly without being told what you can and can't say. Mm-hmm. And I think that people really want to hear that. I think it's refreshing when people hear, honesty and things that challenge their thinking. That's what I like about Joe is he brings on people from all over the spectrum.
Yeah.
And he really just lets them talk.
Well, and what's interesting too is like Fetterman. He brought on Fetterman recently. Yeah. And I had a preconceived idea about Fetterman. And, the conservative media was really blasting him and he's a slob and, blah, blah, blah. And like, but then just
moderate.
Having a conversation with him, I was able to listen to him and not just a soundbite, but like for 2 hours, talk to Joe Rogan. And I said, I can see where this guy's coming from. I don't think he's as bad as, and he had the stroke, which is affecting a lot of his thing, which you could kind of say, whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, like I see where this guy's coming from and I don't hate him.
Yes.
Yeah,
but if you don't,
I don't agree with him necessarily on everything.
But if you don't listen to him speak, you'll never know that.
Yeah.
You know, it's the sort of same thing with J.D. Vance. I think that a lot of people had that experience with him. Like, we were being told he's a weirdo, you know, he's off his rocker, he's all over the place. And then you listen to him
3 hours like Joe Rogan.
That's a real reasonable guy.
I can hang out with that guy.
Yeah, I definitely don't hate him. I don't think he's weird. And I think that's sort of because of that, all that hyperbole, it like really sort of, they painted themselves, they're shooting themselves in the foot because you don't have to go that over the top to sort of make your point and make people not like him, but they did. And when you do, and that becomes exposed as a lie, then you now lost more credibility.
Well, and even during the presidential debates, like they were trying to bring up the very fine people thing. I'm like, that's already been debunked.
They know that's it's not
debunked.
True. Or the Project 2025.
Yeah.
Zero to do with Trump.
Right.
I'm not saying Trump doesn't agree with some of the stuff that's in there. I do. But to slap him, that was the whole strategy, is slap in there. It's still going to be. They're still hammering on it. But yeah, that this is Trump's Project 2025. They said it over and over and over again.
Right.
And are still saying it. And it's what's Joseph Goebbels' thing. That you tell a lie, repeat a lie often enough, and it becomes the truth.
Repetition.
That's all it is.
It's just
and that was true then, and it's still true now.
Yeah.
But I think people since COVID are getting wise to the whole gaslighting thing.
Starting to. I think, they've lost a lot of credibility. It's not, things that media says are not just immediately accepted as fast as they had been.
No, but the point of your 3-hour conversation, like think about how you can't hide your real self in a that's why he wanted to drag her on, right? Yes. She refused. Trump is like, let me get out, right? All of us would be willing. Let's get out there. I'm okay to show my personality. And Noam Chomsky talks about this too. The whole media is just about sound bites. You can chop anybody up and make them look like whatever you want to make them look like if you chop them up.
And I don't think a white supremacist Nazi would be able to sit and talk with Joe Rogan for 3 hours
and not reveal himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Exactly. No, and that's the point too of nuance and face-to-face conversations from my previous thing that we just did. It's like we got to get back to just like getting to know real people and doing face-to-face stuff, because this whole like hiding behind freaking social media stuff, it's crazy land, right? The whole media itself is crazy land. Having face-to-face conversation, that's one of my big things. I don't know. I'm a weird proponent of that, but
I love it. I think it's great.
Well, and all the media outlets are owned by the same people. So
Yeah.
it's not Fox versus CNN. It's just more of the division.
Yeah.
We're coming full circle now. But
Yeah. Well, and I think that would be a great conversation to have too at one point. Like, we should talk about who are they?
right.
You know, and then why do they want us divided, and how we can band together, and I think with this pendulum swinging, there's a sense of, I feel like, hopefully, because I think in my own life, just speaking personally, it's like, man, I want to be more bold. It's like I remember when I was young, as a Christian, it was like, oh, like not that I'm ashamed of Jesus, but I don't want to say that I'm a Christian or talk about Jesus. Like this, it goes against culture, and that's not accepted, and I don't want to be a weirdo. But I think the more confident I got in my faith and my belief, it was like, you know what, like, I'm not afraid to talk to you about Jesus or, have that conversation, because I'm confident in that.
Right.
And then I think there's an element of being conservative or whatever that's kind of been like looked down upon, and you get put in this instant box of, this is who you are if you're a conservative.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to be more like confident. And I think if we're confident in our own lives, we'll attract other people to be more confident and to be like, oh, because even my son, it's like, he's in 8th grade and friggin' he wore a Trump hat to school the next day because he was like so proud. Like, and I was like, dude, are you sure you want to do that? Like, and it's like, but he was just like, yeah, I don't care. Like, I don't care what people think. Like, whatever. Yeah,
that's wow.
Solid.
That's
you're right.
That's straight.
He's like, you're more confident than me. I appreciate you.
Because that teenage phase of your life is the most, like, your peer pressure is heavy duty then, right? So that was a huge step. How'd it go?
It went well. Like, I mean, I think he's real confident in who he is, and I love that about him. And he actually got some people giving him high fives, and all the other people who are afraid, right? Then see him and say, "Oh, if he can do it, then hey, good job."
That's leader stuff right there, bro.
Yeah,
totally.
That's cool. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyways, all right. Well, I guess we wrap up this episode.
That's a
but
wrap.
then maybe we get back together and have some more conversation.
Find out who they
It
is.
was fun.
Yeah. Exactly.
Those flat earthers.
Well, we all know they're lizard people, so
Lizard people. We're gonna end on lizard people. I like it.
it's just clickbait,
Hey, wait, Tyson and Paul are fighting. Let's go.
That's right. Yeah. All right. So don't forget to like this episode and subscribe, and whoresandrobots.com?
Whitebloodcells.com?
Okay.
The website isn't up yet. Well,
Okay.
Whores and Robots is up. It's totally dysfunctional. I got to get Ben working on that. It'll be up. You can go to Whores and Robots, which is like, it's another episode.
Yeah, we have to talk all about that.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, thank you for checking out the video. Absolutely subscribe. We'll get a website up soon. Thanks, guys.